Radio show live here on KCOH TV Radio, The Boost in Houston, Texas. And I'm your host, Laurel Rutledge, and I cannot wait for the show to start because spending Tuesday mornings with you is a highlight of my week. And if you're listening or watching on one of my pages, be sure to give StreamYard permission so I can see your name and I can see your comments. And let me know where you're tuning in from so I can give you a shout out on the air. I know we have a global audience, and I want to acknowledge you for taking the time to listen to me. For those of you in my time zone, and for those of you who are way out of it, I also want to welcome your questions and your comments. Now, I got to run so I can get ready. See you soon. Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday morning, the first Tuesday in May, May the 2nd. I kind of like it when a month, like the first day of the month starts on a Monday. It just, I kind of like that feeling. Anyway, it's Tuesday. I am Laurel Rutledge, your host of the Rutledge Perspective Radio Show, live here on KCOH TV, Global Networks, The Boost. Actually, Laurel K. Rutledge, as Jerry P. Beasley reminds me. And I spend every Tuesday, just about every Tuesday with you guys, 10 a.m. Central Time, streaming live. I'm going to be changing my streaming platform soon, so you'll still be able to see me, but it'll be a little bit different platform that hopefully will be a little bit more reliable and stronger. So we'll be getting all that stuff done, doing lots of tech stuff after Mercury decides to go on home. So we'll be getting all that stuff shored up for you as well. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about gatekeeping, and I'll let you know how that came up, but it's a thing, y'all. So we're gonna talk about that in the context of leadership, and I'll tell you how it came about. Now, voting, it is getting so much more important, and one of the issues that's coming up is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about gatekeeping this week. But understand that it is every citizen is a voter. Every citizen is a voter. And so we want to make sure that everyone has a right to exercise their vote and use their voice. And so please get registered. Double check your registration. Please double check your registration. If you think you're registered, go double check your registration. Because again, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes. And we need to really start paying attention and all of this. So this time voting, because there's not a lot of votes going on right now. Chile is coming up on the 7th. They've got a constitutional assembly, but nothing in the U.S. until November. So not a lot of voting stuff to talk about per se. But votes, your vote has consequences, right? Elections have consequences. And so we are battling some absolute madness right now in the U.S. And all of this leads into this gatekeeper conversation for today. I told you guys last week about the League of Women Voters. They are nonpartisan. They do not back a party or a candidate. They don't do that. They go after legislation that may, in fact, and does, in fact, hinder citizens' rights to vote. They have some things around gerrymandering, around redistricting, around women's rights to choose. I mean, it is, they're going after big issues and active in really making sure everybody's voice is heard, not just those margins, but the voices are heard of everyone. And so, I was reading my newsletter from them again and just going back and looking at where some things are landing. And this whole idea of allowing the Secretary of State to take over local elections if there is a good cause to believe that there's a problem. Not that there's a problem. If there's a good cause to believe there's a problem, right? That makes no sense, y'all. They're taking it away from the folks that we have elected locally to be able to oversee our elections. And these folks are working hard. They are working really hard to make sure that everyone gets the right to vote, that they have the right ballot, all of those kind of things. Do you have a few people here and there who are doing stupid stuff and just being nasty at the polls? Yes. But the folks who are running the elections, they are trying to make sure that everybody who shows up is able to vote. So make sure you know your rights. Go to When We All Vote, go to Ballotpedia. Make sure you know your rights for your state for voting. And especially if there's changes in ID restrictions, because they're trying to do that everywhere as well. But one of the things as I was reading, because you guys know I've talked to you about this foundation that I'm going to be building to go after K through 12 education and 3 pillars in K through 12 education. And I was just looking at some of the things that they're working on, the League of Women Voters are working on in terms of education and legislation. And we got this whole voucher thing that's coming back again, right? Again, we got this thing. It's like the cockroach that'll never go away, right? It keeps coming back. And we're not getting at those root cause issues. Because if you think about it, we all know in Texas, well, hopefully we all know that property taxes are what funds school. That's why our property taxes are so high. We don't have a state income tax. Property taxes fund schools. The state only funds about 41%. 41% of schools, of the school budget is state funded. Only 41%. The rest of that is property taxes. Well, guess what? Those property taxes are based on the value of your property. Get where I'm going with that, right? All of these challenges that started way back, right? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, way back with where we let people live, how we let them live, what kind of loans we allowed them to have, what we did in terms of taking care of property, all that kind of stuff plays into value of homes, which plays into property taxes, which plays into how much funding there is for the schools. So some neighborhood schools in poor neighborhoods are underfunded. The teachers are underpaid. There's underrepresentation, for them. It's a whole thing, right? And so I was listening to that this morning, and the fact that Texas rank 38th in per pupil funding, 38th. Okay. So then we start talking about what happened is I had this conversation with someone and they were like, no, you can't do that. We don't know who you are. You can't do that. Blah, 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 blah. What it was doesn't matter. And then I was in church on Sunday and she was talking about, Jesus Christ is the gatekeeper. And what does it really mean about being a gatekeeper? And I started thinking about business and leadership and how, one of the most important people you can know is the executive assistants around the organization, because they are the gatekeepers. If you need to get to somebody, you have to go through them. If there's information you need, they got it. Right? They know where all the bones are buried, right? They are the gatekeepers of the organization, especially they're the gatekeepers of people's calendars and schedules, right? They are gatekeepers. And then I started thinking about what's going on with banning books and what's going on with education and how one parent, not even both parents in a household, one parent can decide they don't like a book and that book can be banned in Florida. Banned, right? And the hypocrisy of saying we need to have there needs to be parental freedom. Well, where does your freedom have why is your freedom greater than mine? Why do you get to decide what my kid gets to read? And by the way, when did you get a master's degree in education? Or for that matter, a PhD like some of our educators have, the ones who've actually gone to school, the librarians who've actually gone to school? What do you know? And if you're so worried about what your kid is reading, how about you fix that at home? How about you pay attention to what's going on at home? And by the way, if they're given something in a classroom, you can absolutely go to that school and go to that teacher and say, I do not want my kid reading that. How about you do that? How about you adult up and deal with your child? How about that? How about that, right? Stop trying to be a gatekeeper for everyone else. For everyone else. It is not your role to do this. And here's the bigger issue, and why I wanted to talk about this today, is that this is where it starts. This is where it starts. I used to have a dream when I was really little. I sound like Martin. I had a dream. I used to have a dream when I was good morning, Jenny. I used to have a dream when I was really little. And I used to say, it was after, I say really little. It was like 7th grade when we were taking Texas history. And 7th and 8th grade. We were taking Texas history and then U.S. history. And I remember thinking to myself, just because my parents read to us all the time. We read a ton of stuff all the time. And I remember thinking, man, if you look at history, because see, my parents let me read history. If you look at history, every great power has fallen. Every great power has fallen. And I remember Lord, every great power has fallen. Please don't let that happen before I die. Right? Please don't let that happen while I'm still here. We are on the precipice. Right now, fallen has different connotations, but we are on the precipice. And here's how that all ties together. Where it starts is hoarding information from people, only allowing them to learn and hear and believe and see what you want them to learn and hear and believe and see. That's where it starts institutionally. It starts with rewriting history, right? I was listening to a biblical scholar the other day who said, if you think back to 1865 and the Bible that was given to slaves only talked about, it didn't talk about the bad stuff. The version that they were given only talked about praying for, doing good here so you could have a better life afterwards. That's the indoctrinations. All these folks yelling about indoctrination. That was indoctrination early, right? Ensuring that people only got to hear what you wanted them to hear. And because it was illegal to teach a slave to read, they were relying upon people who were telling them information. That's where we got a lot of the oral histories. That's why, if you hear about getting your hair cornrowed, those were maps and things. There were other ways to communicate through song, right? Through music. That's where it happened because you didn't know the information you were getting was reliable. And in most cases, it wasn't reliable. It was biased. So it starts with this control of information and access to information. When we're pulling books off library shelves, stop it. If you've decided to have kids, you are responsible for parenting those kids. And if you don't want them to read something, then you don't let them read it. You pay attention to what they're bringing home from the library. Be the parent, right? When COVID hit and all you guys had to start homeschooling, you weren't really excited about that because you realize the teachers are with your kids all day while you're working, right? And they're trying to teach them. So all this new math stuff and everything, y'all, right? It's a lot. And don't get me wrong, I am not here to shame parents because it is a huge job for many, 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 many years, right? Where you put yourself on the back burner. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is let's not sit back, right, and allow the gatekeeping to set us up for generations of failure. You're so worried about your kids and grandkids. I'm worried about my nieces and nephews. They're going to be making decisions for me when I'm 80, right? I'm worried about these kids that are in my life. And so if we really are worried and concerned about them, what are we doing to prepare them today to get there? And being a gatekeeper doesn't do that. Preventing them from getting information doesn't do that. Telling them how to think, making them blindly following, does not create adults who can think critically, take in information, discern that information, and make decisions. We are so worried about AI, which is a little scary for me too. AI and social media and how so many things are fed to us through social media because we haven't taught people how to be discerning. Yes, we're worried about like deep fake videos and all the things that people can do, but it's just the basics that we're having trouble with because we're such gatekeepers and so protectionist and nationalistic about information that it's so easy to have people get in because we're gullible, because we don't know any better, because we haven't seen anything, we haven't done anything, we haven't experienced it, we haven't experienced anything, right? We're not allowing the experts who have studied, right, who have really studied and learned and gained that level of expertise to guide, right? There are people who are experts in curriculum design, right? Both student and adult education. Let's let them do their jobs, right? Let's stop being a gatekeeper for the expertise because we say they're experts, right? We're sending our kids to them. Let's stop it for political reasons. And so when we think about gatekeeping and the challenges around gatekeeping, it is one thing as a leader to manage the information that is sent to and through and for your team to be appropriate for their level of management, right? There are some things, if you a CEO, if you're a founder, if you're a senior VP, there are some things that you will share with your immediate team, your direct reports, because theoretically, they are capable of handling that information. The complexity of the information, potentially the confidentiality of the information, all the things. Their direct reports will get some information, but it may not be all the detail. And then on down and down and down. And then other people that are kind of boots on the ground may get a direction, right? They'll get the why. If you're a good leader, they'll get the why, but they may not get all of the detail. Because see, not everybody needs to see how the sausage is made. They just need to know we're making sausage, right? So there is a level of information management, manning the gate, not keeping the gate, manning the gate, that must occur as a leader. You have to understand the information that's there, the impact of the information, how the information should be disseminated, what the impact of the information is on your organization and on your people, right? The information itself, the information if it could get twisted, the information if it could be misinterpreted, the information if it could just be innocently, right, given out to the wrong people at the wrong time, right? You have to man the gates of information, not gatekeep. Man the gates of information. Understand that leadership means managing how work gets done with and through and for others, right? And so part of that is manning the gates of information. Gatekeeping is deciding who gets access to what, period, the end, no argument. Who gets to be in what meeting? Who gets to make which decisions, right? And this goes beyond just the amount of authority assigned by your role, right, or your level. I'm talking about those folks who decide, you know what, we're getting ready to do this project. We don't need any women on this project because see, they're just going to ask too many questions. Or, yeah, we've got all this diversity stuff coming on, but you know, if we look at budget, we really need to be putting our budget somewhere else. So we'll give them something. We'll give them something. Gatekeeping the money, right? Gatekeeping the budget, gatekeeping authority. Do I really have the authority to make decisions, or do I have to run everything by you? Gatekeeping, right? Gatekeeping undermines innovation, creativity, access, experience, right? Accountability, responsibility. Because if you're gatekeeping everything, then guess what? You own it. You own the accountability, you own the responsibility. Now, some people, especially politically, want to be the gatekeepers because they want to own it. They want to control it, right? Gatekeeping is about control. But if you are leading, gatekeeping can be oftentimes detrimental to the very things you're trying to accomplish, right? The podcast that drops tomorrow, so the Rutledge Perspective podcast drops every Wednesday, and the podcast episode that drops tomorrow, I'm talking about upper and lower control limits, right? Setting guardrails and guidelines, right? As opposed to rules, guardrails and guidelines. It's the same thing around gatekeeping, right? That manning the gate is not deciding who gets in and out, right? Who gets to come in and stay in, who gets forced out, right? That's gatekeeping. I get to decide who gets to be in the club. Augusta, I'm looking at you because it's golf season, right? I get to decide who gets to be in the club. All those restricted clubs of the 50s and 60s that I think probably still exist in some places, sundown towns, right? We get to decide who gets to be here in our space. That's gatekeeping. And we get to kick you out if we decide you're not here. For example, in Arkansas, there's some amendments going forward in Arkansas, education-related amendments. And there were students who showed up to give their opinion about these amendments. The person in Congress, the woman in Congress, I believe her last name was English, did not allow any of these children to speak. She kept saying, you can't talk about that. Every time they'd open their mouth, you can't talk about that. You can only talk about this amendment. You can only talk about the amendment. And finally, a couple of kids said, I am talking about the amendment. I'm talking about how this amendment goes too far or doesn't go far enough, right? I'm talking about the amendment. The amendment is a problem. You can't talk about that. And then finally an adult got up, which was interesting because she didn't cut the adult off. And by the way, most of these children that she cut off were Black and brown children. Just let me put that out there. But these were children who had taken their time to study and to show up and participate in the process. And she acted, yep, you got in the, you actually got to get in the seat, but I'm not going to let you say anything. Because, see, I'm gatekeeping what gets out in the public. I'm gatekeeping what gets in the record. Because I don't want it in the record, anything that you say that is an opinion that is contrary to the amendments that apparently I want to make sure pass. Right? And that gatekeeping just completely slammed these kids. It did one of two things. As the other adult who came up said, I can't, it's shameful what you were doing. And by the way, you gave, by your action, you actually gave more voice to these kids than took it away. I am believing that these kids who were strong enough to show up are also strong enough to show, or strong enough to see how absolutely hypocritical and asinine and out of her office this woman needs to be, and actually vote. Go get registered and vote. Get active about their opinions. Study. Go get books. Go see different perspectives. I hope they actually get fired up because the gatekeeper tried to keep them out of the process, out of the people's house in Arkansas. Tried to keep them out. Tried to keep them. And we're not talking about decorum. We're not talking about protocol, all that stuff they tried to play in Tennessee, right? We're not talking that. We're talking children who followed the rules and were still shut out of the process. Gatekeeping. When you are leading, if you sit in the role of a gatekeeper, what are you missing? You say you want innovation. You say you want to move fast. You say you want people who want to feel like family. You say you want this place to be a place that people feel valued and that they want to come to work. And you got this great project and you want everybody excited about it. Well, do you? Because your actions say something different. And people will listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do. And what are you doing? Are you manning the gates so that you have a level of protection for people who may not quite be ready for a certain level of leadership or responsibility? Unbiased evaluation of that, by the way. Are you manning the gates to ensure, right, that there is safety? Or are you gatekeeping? Are you keeping all the folks out that aren't yes people? Are you keeping all the folks out who have a different perspective than yours? Are you kicking folks out who you let slip in and then, they had a contrary opinion and they said it publicly? So now you're embarrassed and your ego's hurt because you're all in your emotions. You're all in your feelings. That's not a leader. All of you leaders that get up and talk bad about people and yell and scream and do all this kind of stuff, you're not a leader. You're a bully. You're operating out of ego. And then you want people to support you and fall behind you. If leading by fear is your thing, then you'll get that for a certain period of time. And then the people who you're training to act like you are going to act like you to you. Then what are you going to do? Right? That gatekeeping, that ego, that emotion, not only is it toxic, it is something that is going to get in the very fiber of the DNA of your organization or your team or your business that you're leading, and it is going to eat it from the inside out. And before you know it, you've got nothing, and it snuck up on you because your ego and your emotions were leading. Right? You were gatekeeping. You were trying to make sure that everything was pristine and perfect and there was no dissension. But that lack of dissension also leads to a lack of information, a lack of understanding, a lack of pre-planning, a lack of early notification. All that stuff also comes with gatekeeping. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's waiting for you on the other side of the gate when you decide to go out and leave everybody else in. You don't know because you have decided to keep all of the information close and only dole it out when you feel ready or generous, or that it's in your best interest to let a little bit of information out, to trickle it out, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. Let me give you a little bit, then I'm gonna give you a little bit more, then I'm gonna give you a little bit more, right? If this isn't name for you, think about this. Gatekeeping versus manning the gate. You know, when you get a new puppy that is not house trained. You try to keep them managed, right? You give them certain areas for them to be able to learn to self-manage, right? So you may have them a baby gate or a puppy gate, right, in the laundry room. So they have the whole laundry room to move, maneuver, and run around, but you've put a gate at the door of the laundry room, and then you're manning that gate, right? Right. You're allowing them room to move, but there's a pin there. And then once they are able to do that, and you don't come back and find, your dryer scratched and your dryer sheets all over the place, right? Then you open it up and maybe you give them a roam of the kitchen or the living room. You're right. You gradually increase the space. You are manning the gate, right? You are paying attention to what's happening and how it's happening and what's needed. And then you are moving purposefully to meet that need, right? The puppy's getting bigger. They're able to manage this space. We need to give them more space, right? We are manning the gate. Now, gatekeeping in that instance may be, you know what? I have a rescue. The rescue has some separation anxiety. I have got to make sure that I crate the rescue every time I leave the house because they're just not able to manage the departure, right? That's real gatekeeping, right? You're in protective mode. You're making sure they can't get out, right? They absolutely cannot get out until you let them out. The space is really confined, right? Gatekeeping, because there's a different reason for the gate being there or the crate being there in the first place, right? Those executive assistants that are gatekeepers, there's a reason they're there. They are protecting the schedule of their executive, right? So that they have time to eat. They have time between meetings so they're not running from pillar to post with no time, right? That there is no waste of time or engagement with them in things that are unnecessary for their involvement, right? Those they're manning the gates of those calendars, right? The reason I talk about them being gatekeepers is because sometimes when there's a very long tenure or a very lengthy relationship with a certain executive and their executive assistant, right? They've just been working together for years and years and years. The gate manning can often become gatekeeping. The assistant then decides who gets in and who gets out without even having a conversation with the executive, right? Under gate manning, they're like, hey, here's some things that are on your calendar. Here's the ones that have come to ask more. Here's what I'm thinking, but I want to make sure, we're on the same page. That's gate manning. Gatekeeping is they don't even know somebody tried to come talk to them or tried to make a phone call. They don't even know that. They don't know an email came through. They don't know none of that, right? That's gatekeeping. And sometimes gatekeeping is necessary, right? Like the new rescue in the crate, or you've got a new senior executive who really doesn't know people, so you do more gatekeeping than gate manning, right? Because there's some things about the organization that they don't know because you've been there a long time, and you want to make sure to have a little bit of more protecting. Now, a good gatekeeper keeps the gate, but then also tells the person, right, that's inside the gate, hey, here's what's going on, just letting you know, right? We need to call your detail today, that kind of thing. But gate manning enables you to still have some control over what's going on, right? What information is getting out, what information is coming in. There's a level of management of that, not control, but management of that, with an open mind to what the purpose is, what the support is, what the need is, right? The need of the people inside and outside of the gate, right? It is a leadership management process to man the gate, right? It is a leadership or management process to man the gate. You are a dictator if you're keeping the gate, right? I heard somebody call what's going on in Florida American fascism, right? I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Because we're throwing lots of words around right now, right? Socialism, fascism, and all these kind of things. We're throwing lots of words around that half the people that are throwing them around don't really know what they mean. And even if they know what they mean, they've never really experienced it in real life, right? But there are people around them who are listening to them who have. There are people who have lived in really autocratic or fascist or socialist environments. They've lived them, right? They have experienced them directly. And so when you throw words out like that and they may be new to the environment they're in now, there's a level of concern or fear or action that they take based on their actual experience. When you're manning a gate and you're cascading information through that process of manning the gate, part of that manning is understanding that everybody brings something every day they come into work. They bring their experiences. They bring what's going on in their life right now. They bring their family ideas. They bring their trauma. They bring their, they've got 12 baseball games and 6 dance recitals and all this kind of stuff going on that they got to go to. Plus they got 12 projects that are working and they got team members that are out, and people bring stuff with them. Manning the gate understands that I don't have to be in everybody's business, but I have to be mindful of the fact that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I won't be aware of and don't necessarily need to be aware of. I just need to be mindful that it's there. And so before I jump to conclusions, as I am manning this gate, and I jump to conclusions about people's behavior or response or those kind of things, I need to take a beat, take a breath, understand that everybody's got something going on, reevaluate, how did I deliver it? Why did I deliver it? What's all the things? Is there something that I missed first? Go to home first, and then decide what you take action on. That's what leaders do. Leaders understand to take a beat. That doesn't mean you don't take it personally. That doesn't mean you don't get upset. That's not what I mean. You're human, right? Leaders are human. Leaders have ego. Leaders have emotions. Leaders have all of that stuff, right? Leaders are human. And great leaders understand that in their humanity is both their genius, right, and their idiocy. And it's important to understand which one is showing up at what time so that you can respond and adjust and flex appropriately, right? That's what's critical. That's what's critical about leadership. And so when I talk about this gatekeeping versus manning the gate, and as you go through this week, for those of you who are leading departments, where there's just so much going on that people are dealing with, and so many issues that are so big, right? And so much hatred and hypocrisy and just madness that has been unleashed, that it is easy to be overwhelmed and defeated and depressed and become your own gatekeeper, right? I do some gatekeeping myself. I am very cognizant of what I let into my mind and my heart and my spirit first thing in the morning. I shut that gate. I am at that gate. And there's stuff that I just do not let in early in the morning, right? Because I'm trying to set myself up for a great day as much as I can every day, right? And part of that is keeping that gate to my mind, right? And my heart and my soul, keeping that gate tight and secure first thing in the morning. So that when I am back to just manning the gate, I am able to have things flow in and out. I'm able to appreciate them for what they are. I am able to release those things with LOVE that are not relevant. And I'm able to capture those things, good, bad, hurtful, joyful, that are needed and necessary for the work I'm trying to do, right? When I'm manning the gate gives you kind of a kind of a permeable surface. Things can move in and out of a manned gate. Things can't move in and out of a kept gate, right? Someone has to decide and allow things to move in and out of a kept gate. So when you think about your leadership, are you gatekeeping or are you gate manning? And if you're gate manning, the beauty of seeing your folks grow and learn and develop, right? You can't expect your organization to be well, let me rephrase that. Because you can't expect anything you want to expect. It's not a can or can't. It's a should or shouldn't. You shouldn't expect your organization to build and support and keep and train and develop amazing leaders who are able to handle tough situations or complex ideas or really quick innovation or customer response. You shouldn't expect to be able to have people who can do that as you move up and move out of your organization if you are gatekeeping all of the information, all the experiences that give them what they need to be able to do that. How are they supposed to learn it if you are keeping them so locked in that they never get experience or exposure? That's what I talk about in this week's podcast, those upper and lower control limits. How do you set guardrails that give people freedom to operate, right? Manning a gate gives people freedom to operate. You are free to stay in this pen. You are free to go out of this pen. You are not free from the consequences of whichever decision you make, but you have freedom to operate based on your desire, your learning, your experience, your expertise, what you want to learn, what you don't want to learn, where you want to go, where you don't want to go. You have freedom to operate. And as leaders who are manning the gates, if we can get really clear on setting up those upper and lower control limits, like a math thing, right? I think it was in statistics, your upper and lower control limit. And if you can picture, because I tend to be visual, if you picture it when you're talking about upper and lower control limits, you have the solid lines, like a solid line at the top, a solid line at the bottom. And then there was this dashed line that went across the middle. And the middle was like 0. And then the top one was like +1. And the other one was like -1, right? So like statistics class. And within that, right, you wanted everything that was happening to show up in between those upper and lower control limits. And even Gay Hendricks talks about our upper limit problems, right? That we butt up against our upper limit. And how do we manage that upper limit problem? Well, the challenge for you as leaders, if you're going to be in a gate management perspective and a gate management mode, is making sure that you are clear on the guardrails, right? People understand where the gate is. They understand where the edges of the pen are, right? People understand where the edges are. And within those edges, they have freedom to move, freedom to operate. Sorry, I got the hiccups. Freedom to operate. And you've set those limits because those limits are a representation of things that may be legally a problem, a compliance problem, if you're in leadership, could be truly dangerous, right? So there's things that really could be detrimental to the person or to the business, right? Those limits, that pin, right, that gate, are things that are important for people to understand. That's why, you set up perimeters, those electric shock fences for dogs, right? They can roam all around the yard. They have complete freedom, but when they get to that edge, they get a little shock. Why? Because the things on the other side of that pen are dangerous. The street, right? Chasing a kid, whatever, right? There's some things that are dangerous on the other side of that limit. And I'm not talking boundaries, because boundaries tend to be impenetrable, right? I'm setting a boundary, my boundaries, which is a good thing. We're starting to get really crazy about boundaries now after COVID. And boundaries are important. And so are guardrails. Because boundaries, again, are impenetrable. They are hard, they are fast, they are rules. Guardrails are simply limits. You can actually still go outside of a guardrail. There are consequences to going outside of a guardrail. But by giving guardrails, you allow people complete freedom to move in those. By setting up those gates and manning those guardrails, people have a freedom to operate. And you can see the amazing beauty in their creativity, right? In their innovation, in their speed, in their perspective that may be different from yours, because you've given them freedom to operate. You're like, hey, here's where we're going. Here's the destination. Here's the time we need to get there. Here's the quality that we need, right? Here's the outcomes. That's what we're doing. And we don't want to do less than X, and more than Y is not necessary either. So you know where we're trying to go. Here's your limits. Let's move. Right? The example that I used, that I'll use in the podcast if you download it, is, if you're trying to hire for a team, and you're trying to decide how you're going to pay them, right? And you've got a salary band that's $30,000 wide, right? So your upper and lower control limits, that whole center is really around $30,000, but you're free to operate and free to hire people in within that $30,000 band. Now, you're also responsible for where you hire them in that $30,000 band. Can you justify the salaries that you're giving to people that may be different and should be differentiated? And I know that sounds contrary to people. Pay equity does not mean the same. Equity does not equal the same. Equity means equity. There is still such a thing as value of experience and expertise, right? There's still such a thing as longer tenure so that when that accident happens, you actually know what to do. That commands a bit more than someone who can just push a button and has never seen it before and is going to freeze, right? Now, that doesn't mean you get $40,000, $50,000 more. I'm not talking about that. But when we're talking pay equity, equity does not mean exactly the same. It also does not mean getting 50 cents, 67 cents, 85 cents on the dollar. That's not what that means either, right? It is basing those decisions on objective, not subjective measures. Experience, expertise, proven skills, right? Those kind of things. So anyway, I digress. And we're going to do some shout outs here in a little bit. But I want you guys to really, really get clear about you and how you are leading. Are you gatekeeping or are you manning the gates? Are you giving people freedom to operate or are you telling them what they need to do every step of the way? And one of the ways that you can evaluate it, if you're not really good at doing self-eval, one of the ways that you can evaluate that easier is how many decisions get pushed up to you? How many times do people come back and say, I don't know, what do you think? What should we do? And if you pause, you're like, they should know that. They should be able to do that. Well, why are they coming to you? Because every time they come to you, you tell them what to do. Every time they come to you, you tell them what they can and cannot, should and should not. Every time they come to you, you just fix it. Sometimes because you're just busy, sometimes because you don't think about it, because it's habit, sometimes out of ego, right? Oh, they're coming to me. Let me just fix this for them. What are you doing? If you're evaluating whether you are a gate or you're manning the gate, whether you are manning the gate or you're gatekeeping, how are people approaching you? And how are you responding to them? Because if you're not really great at self-reflection, the actions that are happening around you can reflect to you what you're really doing. Think about that. So we're going to do some shout outs real quick with Jerry P. Beasley.
That's right. Kuwait is in the house. France is in the house. Australia is in the house. Canada, Mexico, Germany, New Zealand, Brazil, Finland, Amistad. Also, Kuwait City is in the house, as well as, I've never heard of this, maybe you know, Christchurch. You know what that is?
Christchurch is in New Zealand.
In New Zealand is in the house. Yeah. New York, Los Angeles, Omaha, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, Raleigh, Kansas City, and Washington, D.C., and Houston.
I love it. And we got Mason, Ohio in the house and a couple other people on here. I can't really see where they are. They haven't done any comments, but welcome. Welcome to those of you on YouTube. Welcome to those of you around the globe. Thank you for joining me this Tuesday, the 2nd of May, 2023, on the Rutledge Perspective Radio Show Live with me, Laurel K. Rutledge, your host. I'm so appreciative that you decided to spend your morning with me, especially on this topic. Because, we talked about reframing last week. And this is a part of reframing too. That gate manning versus gatekeeping. That's reframing. You got to really think about what you're doing. You got to really think about what you're doing. Because if you are keeping the gate and not allowing people to understand and get in and make some things happen, that has long-term consequences for you and for them. Long-term consequences for your business, long-term consequences for your team, for your organization, for your department, right? And again, remember when I started out, I said, there are things you need to be mindful of. Not everyone needs to know how the sausage is made, right? They just don't. That's not necessary for them to be able to effectively execute, right, their obligations, their tasks, their work. They do need enough information to know why they're doing it, what the outcome is, what the expectations are. People deserve to know and have clear expectations. If someone gets to a performance review and they're confused, that's on you, the leader. People deserve to know clear expectations against which they can operate, right? And they deserve to have feedback that lets them know when they're off track. And manning the gate enables you to do that, right? And so it's not about telling everybody everything. That's not what it's about. And especially founders, I'm especially talking to you because that's the hardest thing. When you are building a business and you're starting to put your team together, especially if you're hiring employees, those first few folks, man, that have been in it with you and y'all have been bootstrapping it together. And then all of a sudden you got 30 people, right? And you've kind of reorganized and realigned, and the same people aren't in the meetings all the time. And some of those may have been the ones that were there with you from day one. And now they're kind of salty and their feelings are hurt, right? This is one of the hardest things for founders as you begin to move because you can sit in emotion around it, right? But as you begin to move and as you begin to grow, it is even more important that you think through, what is my overall strategy? And then how does the organization align with that strategy, right? And then what do I need to do to make sure that alignment continues all the time, right? That I'm not off kilter with that alignment. How do I make sure that I'm paying attention to that all the time? And that's difficult because it gets into emotion, right? And sometimes ego. Definitely the ego of the person who's not in the room anymore, right? And being able to have those conversations around limits, right? Upper and lower control limits. Where is their freedom to operate? Right? If you're a CEO, what does the COO have the freedom to operate to do? What is your CFO? Right? What is your director of operations? What is your manager of finance? Where are the upper and lower control limits? What level of decision do they get to make? And based on that, how much information do they need to have to be able to effectively make that decision? Right? Gate manning versus gatekeeping. People do need to know stuff. They just don't necessarily need to know everything. They just don't need to know everything. You're frowning, Jerry. Is everything okay?
Oh, no.
Okay. I'm watching my producer over here. I'm like, oh, okay. Just checking. So I as you guys go into this week and think about all this stuff that's going on, number one, just breathe. I'm having to tell myself that too every day. Just let's breathe. Nothing in the world is new. Nothing in the world is new. What we're going through right now is not new. It is painful, but it is not new, right? And we have been through these things and come out of these things before. They have been painful in the process. They have been difficult, and not everyone has come out unscathed, right? But we have come through them. And so if we can continue ensure that information is available, that we're having open, candid conversations at the appropriate levels, right? At reasonable people, not appropriate levels, not these twisted, crazy levels, right? But appropriate levels, right? Objectively appropriate levels. If we can ensure that there is access to information, that we support and train and uplift people to think critically, to gather data and to know what to do with that data, we are going to be fine. It's just going to be a minute. It's going to be a minute. And our first opportunity to be fine is going to be coming next year in November. Actually, next year, all of next year, and starting in November of this year when we have some more elections coming up towards the end of the year. So let's reframe what we do into the idea of kind of manning our operations, manning our information, right? Manning the gates, manning the doors, manning the windows, understanding what's getting in, what's getting out, and why, and where, and how. Making a definitive decision about that, utilizing it in a way that moves forward and up and out as opposed to backwards, that uplifts as opposed to denigrates, right? We want to make sure that we are taking advantage of, for lack of a better word, taking advantage of the genius that is around us, right? These 18-year-olds, y'all, I'm talking to some of them and I'm like, "Ooh, can you be 20 already and run for something?" Right? 21. Can you just run at 18? Can you? Cuz talking to you is better than talking to some of these grown folks who've got things all twisted, right? There is so much hope that I have to stand in, right? Because if I don't stand in hope, I'll be in full dorsal in my bed, covered up, right, eating ice cream. And yet, there is hope, and we have choices. We have choices about being disciplined. We have choices about showing up. We have choices about saying, you know what, that is just unacceptable. And I am not going to be silent. I am going to speak truth to power, right? We have choices about when and how we show up. We have choices about how we treat people. And we have choices about how we respond to the way we are treated. We have choices about that. We have choices about our attitude. We have choices about the words we use. We have choices about the actions that we take, right? We all have a choice all the time. Now, some choices are good, some choices are easy, some choices are bad, and some choices are difficult. But we always have a choice. So that mindset of, oh, I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You always have a choice. The choices just may be completely not good, right? Unacceptable. None of them is what you really wanted, but you have a choice. You always have a choice. And so I encourage you, as you're really thinking through what you're doing this week and where you're going and how you're leading your teams and what your overall objective and goal is, to mind the gate and not keep it. And where someone is gatekeeping for you, call them on that. Understand why, right? What you are really keeping a lot of information from me. Help me understand. Help me understand, because see, that information that you just kept from me caused me to make this kind of decision because I went with the information that I had. Had I known that other information that you had, the decision I made would have been different, right? It's okay to call gatekeepers on their gatekeeping. There may be a valid reason for the gatekeeping, or they may just be in habit mode and they're just used to keeping everything tight to the vest. And it's time to let it go. But if someone doesn't bring that to their attention, why would they ever change? Because what they're doing now is what they know. It's comfortable. It's habit. You got to have shakeup to change a habit, right? You got to have somebody point out to you that something is wrong in order for you to change it. Very few of us change just because. There usually has to be an impetus to change, especially if you're changing something that's really comfortable or habit. And even if you don't like it, at least you know it, right? That's why that's saying it's the enemy. It's the enemy we know. Sometimes people stay in really bad situations because it's the enemy they know. Man, I could leave, but man, it could be worse over there because the grass is not always greener. At least I know what to expect over here. And you know what? Depending on where you are in your life, that is a valid choice. That's a valid choice. But understand it's a choice. And understand that sometimes we are our own gatekeeper. We are keeping ourselves pinned in. We are not allowing ourselves additional information or additional thoughts or hope or perspective. We are gatekeeping ourselves, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of just of a desire for safety, sometimes out of just fatigue, right, and exhaustion. We just can't take one more thing. But if you're gatekeeping yourself, know that you're gatekeeping yourself too, and start figuring out how you can just man the gate so that you have freedom to operate within the boundaries that you have set for yourself or that someone else has set for you, so that you can learn and grow and experience and gather additional information so that that gate has room for stuff to come in and flow out, right? When you man it, it has room to be penetrated. When you are keeping it, Nothing's getting through that puppy. Not a thing. All right.
Can I say this?
Yes.
You said that about the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Because can you be a gatekeeper for yourself, but in a good way? Saying, okay, you said you don't need to know how the sausage is made. I remember a situation I was like, I want to know how the sausage is made. I need to know. And then I said, I don't need to know because I know what I'm responsible for, and I don't need to know how that sausage is made. Let me make my gumbo over here.
Right.
So I became my own gatekeeper, and I stayed out of that yard because that had nothing to really do with me. Now, if you want me to come visit that yard, can I say it's an additional cost if I come over into your yard?
Right. It's going to cost you.
It's going to cost you.
You know, I think, yeah, I mean, we have to be our own gatekeepers, right? Like I was saying earlier, I have to keep a gate on my mind and my heart and my spirit first thing in the morning. Because if I let just everything in the morning, I allow that stuff to set my day, as opposed to me intentionally setting my day. So we do have to be our own gatekeepers sometimes, a true gatekeeper. And then we always have to be man in our gate. Right. We always have to be mindful of what's going on with us, around us, to us, in us, all that kind of stuff. We got to be mindful of all of that and manage that by, you know, this gate, this one's fine. Maybe I'll lower this one a little bit and let something seep over. Maybe I will put this one up a little bit higher because I need to not let that wind come through this time. Right. We're constantly manning the gates. But sometimes you got to be a gatekeeper and say, yeah, that's not getting in today. Or we're not letting that out.
Because when I hear the word gatekeeper, I look at it from a spiritual,
right,
and then we're making sure that the gatekeeper is always making sure nothing comes in that doesn't need to be in, but a person that mans the gate, that's managing the gate. What's the difference between that?
So if you're keeping the gate, you are absolutely deciding you're in, you're out. I am choosing. If you're just manning the gate, what you're saying is the gate is here. The gate is here for some protection. The gate is here for some boundaries, right? The gate is here for your limits. But your choice is there of whether you enter or exit the gate. I'm just manning the gate, making sure the gate doesn't hit you when you go through it. Making sure the gate, if it's locked or if it's rusty, that you can still get in if you choose to get in. I'm just manning the gate.
And the time to know how the sausage is made is if it's affecting what you've been called there to do.
If it's affecting what you've been called there to do, if it's critical to your ability to make a choice, right? And if you're in a position where you can handle how that sausage is made. Not everybody is ready to handle every piece of information. You know, there's some people who get really, really, really ill and they want to know everything, right? I want to know what it is. I want to know what to do. I want details, like how the cells are moving. There are people who want that. And there are other people who are like, okay, I'm sick. I don't need to know the detail. I just need to know what to do, right? I don't want to know. I don't want to know how long I have. I don't want to know how bad it's going to get. I don't want any information that is forward looking. There's some people who are protecting their spirit. They're manning that. They're gatekeeping that, right? Because they can't handle how the sausage is made. They can't handle the depths of the details of that illness, right? So we got to know our own limits around information and act accordingly. And don't thrust ours upon someone else.
It kind of goes back to what you said. You never wanted employees because you can kind of bypass that.
Exactly.
I'm with you on that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you can bypass all
exactly. And I can still have team. My team just looks different. My team is a team of contracted service providers who I still vet, and not everybody can be on my team, right? And we have enough of a village and a relationship that we can make things happen. But
wait, on that point, because I don't want to forget, because I'm older than you.
Yeah.
When you said not everybody can be on your team, so could somebody say, well, she's trying to be a gatekeeper, she's trying to keep us out. But you said these are contracted people, and you get to decide.
Yes, I get to decide. I get to decide, and I get to decide if I wanted W-2 employees. I get to decide who they are too. Okay. You know, not all gatekeeping and leadership is where you got to be really careful, right? There is some gatekeeping you need. If you are a financial institution, you do not need to hire people who have embezzled money from somebody. Is that gatekeeping? Absolutely. It's also smart business. We're not going to hire somebody who's been convicted of embezzlement when we're running a financial institution. Now, if that was 30 years ago and they were a juvenile, okay, well, maybe you make a difference. But if this is somebody who just got convicted and they're still, well, I shouldn't say that because we got folks that are still under indictment that are in Texas that still seem to be able to do their job. That's gatekeeping. That is protectionist gatekeeping. That is reasonable. And that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit of art, not science, right? Gatekeeping is necessary. You just got to know when you're gatekeeping and when you are manning the gate. And that gatekeeping is so serious and so stringent that only do that when it's absolutely necessary. Because sometimes you're missing some good stuff because you're keeping the gate. All right, y'all. Happy Tuesday. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in and listening. I so appreciate it. The podcast drops tomorrow. I'm going to have some stuff coming up here probably mid-month that I'll be able to announce for you guys. But I will right now plan to see you next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Central Time here, KCOH TV Radio, the Boost Global Network in Houston, Texas, the corner of Alameda and Wichita in the historic Third Ward. We'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you, Mama Young.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Make sure you go out